All right. Hello, welcome everyone to the Community Development Block Grant Office Hours for September 18th, 2024. Here today we have CDBG Specialist Michael Phillips, Jeannie Lee, and myself, our Program Manager, Susan Holt, and our Section Chief, Mamie Early. Did I miss anyone? No. All right, welcome. Today we're going to be giving you the opportunity to ask questions related to the 2024 NOFA. If we're not able to get all questions, you can always send additional questions to our CDBG inbox. And the FAQ will be added to our 2024 solicitation page containing answers to questions we have already received. A little housekeeping, how to ask a question. You can click the Q&A chat bubble to submit a question to the team. We do prefer you put it into the Q&A. You may ask questions anonymously, but if you want your name, organization, or region associated with your question, you will need to type it in your name box. The team will read the questions out loud at the end of the presentation. And all questions will be saved and recorded as part of the public record. Reminders. So we have some required recorded live and pre-recorded webinars, and they can be found at the link. It should be popping up into the chat, our CDBG workshops and trainings playlist. And as a reminder, application opens Tuesday, October 29th, 2024 at 9 a.m. Did you know it's the CDBG program's 50th anniversary? So in collaboration with HCD's communications team, we were able to create some highlight videos for the 50th anniversary, and we promise to do more soon. Currently, there's 3. For the City of King, City of Marysville, and the County of San Benito. And the link to the playlist will be available in the chat. And we are going to watch the first one of these together right now. I have just to make sure I'm sharing sound with you all. All right. Let's
Without CDBG,
go.
I'll guarantee you we would not be where we're at right now. I'll guarantee you that.
Enrique represents one of dozens of communities that have been positively impacted by the Community Development Block Grant Program, or CDBG.
If CDBG did not exist, we would not have the building right behind us. We would not be providing services for our most in need residents of San Benito County.
For 50 years, the CDBG program has benefited communities throughout the country, investing in infrastructure, housing, healthcare, and more. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, provides grants directly to large cities and counties, making up a majority of the program funding provided. The rest of the funding is allocated to states to distribute to mostly rural communities that don't qualify for funding directly from HUD. Since 1983, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, has administered the CDBG program in the state. In that time, HCD has awarded more than $1.3 billion through CDBG, improving the lives of over 350,000 Californians. These projects have helped support community and economic development throughout the state. HCD will continue to collaborate with local partners to ensure communities and residents have the tools they need to thrive.
All right. Oh, this is the second video auto-playing. Please check out the other 2 videos.
Fell over in the street.
And I'm trying not. Okay. Please check out the other two videos. They are fantastic. Our communications team and our team worked really hard on them. So what's new? So last office hours, I was notified that the census boundaries have changed, and so I'm glad that that was brought to my attention. So a new LMA mapping webinar will be available on our CDBG YouTube playlist soon. So the census boundaries have changed since the last LMISD data set. So the existing LMISD map will not work for mapping, especially so if you're mapping for specific census block groups. The new webinar will provide a walkthrough of obtaining a census block map from data.census.gov and new LMI SD data from HUD. Additionally, the following have been uploaded to the Files tab of the application solicitation: the matrix code categories, 2024 main and subsample application questions, and the sources and uses chart. So if you've been looking for those are now available on our solicitations page. All right, now we're going to go through the questions that we received from last office hours. And then after that, we'll begin taking questions in the Q&A. And as a reminder, we are doing an open forum for 2024 NOFA related questions. Please post the website link for the new DFFA environmental review website, please. So it is on screen and it should be uploaded to the chat soon. What does beneficiaries mean? A beneficiary is a person or household that benefits from a CDBG activity. For example, a person receiving services for a public service, a household receiving a rehabilitation grant, or a person obtaining or retaining a job through an economic development activity. The map boundaries for the new LMISD data are different than the old data. Thank you. Please check out slide 7 where we discuss that. When do we anticipate the next NOFA in 2025 to drop? We anticipate it dropping mid-2025. Was there a sample notice of public meeting for this NOFA? Cannot locate on website. If you are referring to a notice template for a public meeting for an application, it is on the CDBG website. Please go to the Grants Management Manual tab and select Appendix 4-1. It is available in both Spanish and English. How do we track expenditures in our PI reporting? Do we list on the sheet? All your PI expenditures should be reported in its open CDBG award. You would report your PI expenditures as you would any normal expenditure. For the PI reporting and receipting solicitation, that is only for your receipts and revenues for PI. What would the proper way to pull all the city's PI into an ED grant? If you have an open award already, you can submit an amendment request with your CDBG rep. You would need a new resolution along with some other documents. Make sure that you have been reporting and receipting if you want to add that PI to an open award. Did the 50% expenditure requirement need to be met at the time of the NOFA dropping? Recently closed and spent grants do not count toward the 50% rule, right? The requirement will need to be met at time of application submission. It is a good rule of thumb to double check your open awards if you are applying for the same type of activity to ensure that you have expended your current awards down to 50%. At the time of reviewing the application, we will review your current annual CDBG awards. For planning grants, can we apply to develop full plans and specs for road construction projects? It is best to reach out to the CDBG inbox to ensure that it is an eligible activity. We will connect you with your representative and we can discuss what your plans look like and what you're trying to accomplish. Do CDBG CV grants count toward the 50% rule? No, they are not part of the calculation, but we do want you to encourage you to spend the CDBG CV money. Can you post a list of required webinars again? The required webinars are listed in our NOFA, and the NOFA is open for everyone to review right now. 50% is by activity code or by category. It is by category. Public services would be grouped together, and planning would be grouped together. Those open awards would count against applications for those types of activities. The 50% rule only applies to competitive applications for this NOFA. All right, now we can get into questions and answers. First question, can you put the link in chat for the FAQ for the NOFA questions? I believe we are working on that, or we will definitely distribute it soon.
The FAQ has been added to the chat box.
Thank you, Jeannie. Anonymous attendee. Are small cities that are partnered with entitled counties are able to apply to those counties for CDBG funds considered eligible applicants for this NOFA? Susan.
Sure, I can take this one. Thank you for your question, Anonymous. That's a good question. So in general, and this is included in the FAQ because you're not the only one that had this question. So it depends on if your jurisdiction, if you currently have an MOU or if you're currently engaged with entitlement with the county, then you cannot also do the state program as well as the county entitlement program. So it's one or the other. Now, if your entitlement, if your agreement to do entitlement with the county is going to expire, then in that case, you can only, really the rule of thumb here is you can only get income from one fiscal year per funding year. So you would not be able to be involved in the entitlement in the same fiscal year that you're involving in the state program. So hopefully that answers your question, and you can refer to the FAQ document. There is a question in there that might answer it a little more clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Anonymous attendee asks, will there be any other workshops scheduled? Usually they are a little more spread out. This time there were only 2 in the same week, just after the NOFA was released. This does not give enough time to strategize and have all our questions ready. Jeannie.
Hello, thank you for your question. We do have, there will not be any more NOFA webinars scheduled. We do have both the NOFA webinar session 1 and 2, as well as the application and budget webinar posted to our YouTube channel, our YouTube playlist. And if you do have any questions after watching those webinars, you are more than welcome to email us, email our CDBG inbox at cdbg@hcdb.ca.gov. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie.
And just to add to that, Tanner, before you start, we do encourage you to review the webinars, review the resources that we have provided. Today, we just dropped all of the FAQs that we had from the webinars. So that's why it's important. And today, we're having this open forum for the folks that has attended the webinars who have reviewed the webinars that may have any further additional questions. So this is the opportunity that we set for those questions that you may have as well.
Thank you, Mamie. Anonymous attendee asks, is the purchase of fire equipment, engine, etc., considered a program or project? Jeannie.
It will be under the project, so OTC.
Thank you.
Over the counter for the anonymous. First come, first serve.
Thank you, Mamie. Jade Padilla asks, which matrix code should be used for PTA? I want to say there should be a specific PTA matrix code, but it looks like a lot of that has been crossed out on the appendix.
I'll take that, I'll take that, Tanner. So for planning grants, or planning applications, you will be using matrix code 20A.
Thank you, Jeannie. Amy Bergstrand asks, working on a PI-only application, and it asks for 21-22 single audit. Do you want the 21-22 or the 22-23? Not sure if this should be updated. Also, can I use the new affidavit of publication from the 2024 NOFA for the PI only application, or do I have to use the older one from that NOFA? Jeannie.
Hi, Amy. You will want to upload the most recent single audit that you have. We will review the PI application to ensure that the correct single audit years are listed on there. As for the affidavit of publication, please, you are more than welcome to use the new one posted.
Thank you, Jeannie. Brandy asks, Jeannie, follow up on LMI SD maps. So there's no other maps with the new mapping? Jeannie, go ahead.
Currently, HUD has not released their mapping tool for the new 2016 to 2020 census data. There will be a webinar coming out on how to use that data.census.gov map. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Anonymous asks, we have asked questions in the email box and still haven't received a response. Is there a timeline which you answer questions? Susan?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm glad that was brought up. We were going to mention. You may notice from the FAQ document that we dropped in the chat, we have been inundated with a large number of questions for this NOFA. So we've been working really hard to make sure that we give you comprehensive and complete answers to your questions, but they've been coming in hot. So just know that we are working diligently to get them answered. We sent out a bunch over the past couple of days, along with making the FAQ document and trying to cross what we've already answered. So I would anticipate any that are outstanding. There's only a handful left in our inbox that we're working on getting your answers. So I would anticipate having those within the next week or so maximum. And I do also want to point out, this brings up a good talking point to remind everyone that you do want to get your questions in sooner than later, because as you can see, it can take a little bit of time for us to get back to you. And so when we get closer to the application opening date and the end of October, we may run into a situation where we're not able to answer questions before the application opens, at which point we wouldn't be able to. So sooner than later, and I would anticipate at least within several days before the application opens, you may not get an answer. So it's a good practice to get going on starting to prepare for all of this so that you can get your questions in sooner. But to answer this one, we hope to have those all of them answered that we have currently over the course of the next week. So hopefully that's helpful, and apologies for the delay.
Yeah. And Susan, just to piggyback on that, I highly recommend to look at the document we just dropped in the chat, and it also will be in our files tab of the solicitation, because a lot of not only the NOFA webinars and the budget Q&As are in that document, but a lot of the questions that were received in the inbox is also in that document. So we may have answered majority of your questions, and they're just presented in the Q&A document that we just dropped today. So please take a look at that. If your question is not in there or your answers are not in there, you're more than welcome to send us an email just to kind of follow up. But we just have a handful left in our box, so I'm very confident that we answered the majority of the inbox questions in that document.
Thank you both. Appreciate you. Anonymous asks, if the most recent single audit is from 21-22 and the agency is working on finalizing 22-23, excuse me, will you excuse me, will you accept the 21-22 single audit? Jeannie?
I can take this. Thank you, Tanner. So for the single audit, if you are uploading, if you only have the 21-22 completed, you will upload the 21-22 single audit as well as documentation from the auditor stating that you have been engaged to work on the 22-23 single audit. Once the 22-23 single audit has been completed, you will be uploading that into eCivis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. An anonymous attendee asks, are engineering, specs, bid manuals, and environmental review record development for a future project eligible under PTA? I think I can take this one. Um, in general, those documents are typically considered eligible under a planning project. Of course, it does depend on what type of project it is. Thank you. Anonymous attendee asks, where can we find FAQs from previous office hours? Um, you may be referring to our newsletter. So if you're signed up for this webinar, you'll get a newsletter from us after every office hours we hold that have all the questions that we answer. If you're referring to the NOFA FAQ, that would be on our solicitation page. Bridget Lacey asks, who should letters of support for competitive applications be addressed to?
I'm unsure of the ask Bridget. I don't believe there is a spot in the application questions for a letter of support. So if you can be a little bit more specific on what you mean by letter of support, maybe we can assist better. Thank you.
Perhaps it's just it's typical for projects to have sometimes will have letters of support even if we don't require them, and you can certainly address them to uh, Susan Holt, perhaps, our fantastic CDBG program manager, and then you could use our new address. I think that will be totally fine.
I agree. Thank you, Tanner.
Paul Ashby asks, confirming that you want all related federal laws and authority topic worksheets to accompany our NEPA. This is a new requirement. Jeannie.
Hi, Paul. Yes, that is correct. That is required by our environmental team. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie. Anonymous attendee asks, to clarify an earlier question, if a jurisdiction is part of a cooperative agreement with their county for entitlement funds but did not receive CDBG funding for the 2024 funding year, can the jurisdiction apply for this NOFA, or does this agreement have to be expiring? Susan.
Sure, I can take that one. You cannot be in a cooperative agreement for entitlement funds and also apply for state funds. So yes, to answer your question, the agreement would need to be expiring.
Thank you, Susan. Brandy Caparasso asks, because there has been changes to LMI SD block group and census tract areas, I'm assuming that if a city is now considered LMA in the local government summaries, then they are LMA. This is critical as some of the jurisdictions that didn't used to be LMA are now LMA, and they are submitting applications based on LMA status. I can answer this. So Brandy, if a city qualifies as LMA or 51% LMI according to the new 2016-2020 LMI SD data, then they would qualify under that for that national objective, as long as they're qualified under the new 2016-2020 data. Thank you. Anonymous attendee asks, if the housing element is adopted or out, can a jurisdiction still apply? Susan, you'd like to answer?
Sure. Yeah. The housing element, the requirement to be able to apply is that you must have a housing element draft submitted in order to apply. The housing element you must be in compliance and adopted, which we work with HPD to make sure of before you can get into a standard agreement. But in order to apply, the only requirement, depending on when your cycle begins and ends, you must have a housing element draft submitted. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Amy Bergstrand asks, I am concerned about the eCivis and uploads. Not sure if you have had this feedback prior, but eVisi keeps declining my upload. Not all of them, or eCivis perhaps, not all of them. I try re-uploading them, saving in Word, and it still won't upload. I finally logged out and back in and it accepted them. Just concerned if this happens when the OTC opens. Also, are there characters that are not permitted when saving a document? Characters in the file name, I'm presuming. Jeannie.
Hi, Amy. I have not heard this feedback. I'm not sure if anyone else has, but I have not heard this feedback about uploads. If you can email us when you do run into this issue, it'd be a lot easier to troubleshoot on the spot.
Jeannie, just to add to that, listening to her statement, sometimes eCivis can time out and it will look like you will upload, but it doesn't upload. So when you log out and log back in, that's why it works, because you're going back into the system. So I've seen it with myself trying to upload documents that it's timed out, it won't save any of my uploads. I don't know if that's what she's referring to and if you experience that, Jeannie.
Yes, I do experience the timing out, so there might be a timeout issue. And in terms of characters, I do know that there are certain characters that are not, that eCivis doesn't like. I can't remember, I think it might have been an apostrophe or a dash, definitely a slash. But if you can refrain from using those special characters, I think that would help as well.
Yeah, and I would also, to piggyback off of that, if you are, I know the concern is that you may have issues in the first come, first serve with the OTCs. If you are having technical difficulties, it's really important that you screenshot what's happening and you can send that to the CDBG inbox and let us know immediately upon it happening. Then we can take that into consideration when determining timestamp.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you. Speaking of, anonymous attendee says, thank you, Tanner. Appreciate you. Well, I appreciate you, anonymous attendee. Thank you. Louise Collis asks, I just checked the solicitation page and do not see the FAQ or Q&A. How can I find this? I asked the question several weeks ago regarding planning grants and I'm looking for a response. If submitting applications for 2 planning grants, do we complete 2 sub-applications for the same matrix code? Jeannie would like to answer.
The FAQ Q&A is not yet posted to the solicitation page. It will be shortly. The FAQs have been uploaded to the webinar chat box for now. In the meantime, to answer your question about the planning grants, yes, you will be submitting 2 sub applications for 2 different planning grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Anonymous attendee asks, to clarify, is the housing element referring to the 6th cycle housing element? Susan.
Sure. So everyone is in a different cycle depending on when you first submitted and various factors. So it's whichever cycle that you're in. What we're going to be making sure and checking at the time of application review is whether you have your draft minimum, a draft housing element submitted. If you're in the process of that being adopted or going back and forth with HPD on required changes or anything, that's all fine. And we do check in with those folks to make sure that your jurisdiction is being timely and responsive and taking care of it. But at a minimum, whatever cycle you happen to be in, because everyone's in a different cycle, the draft housing element must be submitted at the time of application, and that is what we'll be checking for. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Perhaps it's Susan, if it's like easier to say whatever is due to the state, that's
Right.
what we want to be seeing.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But minimum a draft must be in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks, Susan. Anonymous attendee asks, I've had this happen, so I just changed the name of the document. It doesn't like certain characters. Oh, thank you. I think that's for Amy. Thank you, anonymous attendee. All right, so that's all of the questions we have in our QA, but I believe we had some questions that came through in our chat, and let me just take a moment to review those. Tyler Somerset in the chat asks, we have a developer with a 46 lot subdivision who can't get the project off the ground due to infrastructure expenses. Are sidewalk, city, sewer, water expenses eligible projects if the resulting homes will meet low to medium income thresholds? I could take this. Um, First of all, I encourage you to reach out to our CDBG inbox or your assigned rep if you have one. Um, this scenario does happen sometimes. So if a affordable housing complex cannot connect to the road or connect to infrastructure, it in some cases it is eligible to provide for that infrastructure first, and then that will lead to affordable housing being built. But it really depends on the situation. So please reach out to us for more information. Okay, some questions in the Q&A. An anonymous attendee asks, what is the cutoff date of when HCD can advise on the content of applications? Susan?
Sure. So the cutoff date technically is going to be the date that the application opens. So October 29th. At that point, HCD can only advise on technical questions, issues you may have with uploading to eService, for example. We'd be able to help with those sorts of things, but nothing specific for applications. But as I stated earlier, I highly recommend, because just logistically, it's going to be very difficult to get. If you ask a question 10 minutes before the application opens, you won't get an answer. If you ask the day before, you might get an answer. So I would ask them as quickly as you can. The technical cutoff, like I said, is going to be October 29th at 9 a.m. when the whole thing opens. But the likelihood of getting an answer to something that you asked a day or two ahead of that is slim. So I would recommend that at least a couple of days before the application submission period opens, that you have your questions through. And if you haven't gotten an answer, just follow back up with the inbox as a high importance, and we will do our very best to get you those answers. Thank you. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Susan. Anonymous attendee asks, would it be allowed if PI that is currently in home be moved to economic PI fund? How do we go about that? Do we need approval from CDBG? I can take this, and please feel free, colleagues, to jump in. If you're referring to program income that is generated by the home program activities, that is going to be a longer conversation that we'll need. So please go ahead and reach out to us at the CDBG inbox, just to get some clarity on what you might be asking, because at this point it's not clear.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll just jump in and add,
Sure.
Tanner, that I did talk to the home team about something like this prior, and what it came down to was that um, while we can do like a joint home CDBG program, the PI that you encumber into the contract must be on like the side that you generate the program from. So if it's home program income, it has to be encumbered in the home contract. If it's CDBG program income, it has to be encumbered in a CDBG contract. So I think what this question is asking is if you have home PI, can you encumber it in a CDBG economic development PI contract? And the answer to that would be no. It would have to be encumbered in a home project or a grant contract. I hope
Thank you,
that
Mike.
answers the question. Yep.
Anonymous attendee asks, can you confirm that the 50% spending rule does not apply to OTC applications? If an agency has an open OTC agreement that has not been spent the minimum 50%, can they still apply for OTC again? So the 50% rule, this NOFA does not apply to OTC applications, only competitive applications.
And I just want to piggyback on that. It doesn't apply to this NOFA, but we have had discussions internally, knowing that there is OTC projects out there that have not spent 50% that are coming in every NOFA year for a new OTC. So we are working on trying to spread the wealth around to other grantees that may not have ever came in for OTC project. But as of right now, our the 50% rule guidelines does not apply to the over the counter, but it is subject to change in the future, just to kind of give you guys the heads up.
Thanks, Bammy. Bridget Lacey says, I just have a comment on the Q&A that was just released. I think that the answers to the questions about the OTC programs are still a bit misleading. The answer I received regarding having multiple OTC programs was that you can have multiple sub-applications with different matrix codes that will only count as one OTC program. I don't see that being made clear on your Q&A form when asked about having multiple OTC programs. Thank you for your comment, Bridget. Mimi, go ahead.
Yeah, Bridget, and just to kind of give you a little bit backstory of why we did the combination in the OTC programs is because we've seen in the past how we had the economic development program separate. So we have grantees that may excel in the technical assistance part of the ED, but not necessarily the business assistance. So with us doing this combination program underneath over the counter, it gives you as the grantee the flexibility to run both of those different matrix codes if it's technical assistance and business assistance and micro enterprise interchangeable, so you can be able to assist as many businesses as you can depending on the needs, instead of saying, hey, I only have this much money left in technical assistance, then I can't help anyone else. But if you need more money in technical assistance, you can use that in that budget between those different matrix codes that you have underneath the economic development programs or the housing programs. So we looked at this as a plus, so you can be able to have that budget flexibility to be able to have that flexibility with your business partners that you're helping in your community.
Thank you, Mamie. Appreciate your answer.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of questions through the chat again. Angel Johnstone asks, can you give a couple examples of stellar ED planning grant awards over the past years? We are currently sifting through a few ideas. Thank you, Angel. I think I can kind of summarize what our ED grantees have done in the past. Typically, we will see a business assistance or micro enterprise assistance program that provides direct loans or grants to businesses for certain items that will help uh, operating costs, equipment. I'm struggling to find other things, but and then those programs either assist a low mod income business owner, or it will end up in the creation or retention of a job that is filled by a low income person, a low income earning person. And then on the other side, we have projects that construction projects that are aimed at economic development as a whole. So we have options under the CDBG program. And if you want to discuss more, you can always reach out to us. Couple questions came through the Q&A. Bridget Lacey asks, are you saying that we are going to be able to move money from one SAP application to another easily with the combination OTC ED programs? Jeannie.
Hi, I can take this. So if you are awarded an ED, OTC ED program grant, and you do have multiple matrix codes in it, we are with this new way of doing applications, yes, you should be able to move money easily around between one ED sub-application or sub-award to another sub-award of ED in the same, yeah, application.
Thanks, Jeannie. I wanted to piggyback on that and just kind of reiterate what Jeannie and Mamie both have said about that. So that's one of the reasons we have a main application and a sub application. So the main application has your overall grant amount for all sub applications included, and the sub applications doing it this way gives you that flexibility to be able to move money around within the grant without having to do a full amendment. So we're trying to streamline it a little bit for everyone. And I think this is the way that we've come up to be able to do that. So hopefully it's helpful to everyone. We appreciate your feedback on it too. Thanks, Jeannie, too, also.
Thank you both. Amy Bergstrand asks, I don't remember the previous recording mentioning this regarding the sources and uses for just the activity. Do you just want overall cost as a lump sum or break down line items? Right. So in our eCivis budget, we are asking just for activity line a lot, just one activity line item. So you're asking what are we preferring for the sources and uses spreadsheet? And I believe in the past we've seen some line items, and then sometimes it's just one line item for activity or activity delivery. And correct me if I'm wrong, team, but I don't think there is a preference under
We
that sources and uses.
can I going let me jump in here real quick. For the sources and uses, we do want it broken down and not a lump sum. We do want to see that it the entire activity has been planned for. You guys have considered administration. You guys have considered material costs, activity delivery costs, all the different components to run a project or program. So yes, we do want it broken down in resources and uses.
And
Thank
especially, just to add to that, especially if you have other funding sources that's associated with that project or program, the sources and uses will give us that clear picture that we won't be able to see on the eCivis budget, of what fundings are being used as well, in this project, not just CDBG funds.
Thank you both. I stand corrected, so listen to them, not me. Let's see. We don't have any more questions in our, oh, it just came in. Anonymous attendee asks, what are the permitting requirements for a public facilities project, street, road improvements? Generally, we will have the NEPA and CEQA prepared, the design and specs prepared, and a draft bid prepared. We are also ready to bid out the project within 60 days of any award. Having said that, the awarded contractor post-award would apply for any necessary permits, which would be minimal given that it is a city-sponsored project with city site control. What do they expect to see to comply with the new permit rule? Do they want a letter from the city stating that all permits will be obtained upon award to the contractor?
All
Susan, go
right,
ahead.
I will take my best stab at this. So permitting requirements can be different. Depending if they're state permitting requirements or local permitting requirements. So we don't really touch into those. We kind of give a good faith that you are getting your permits prepared properly. And I think a letter from the city stating all permits will be obtained upon award to the contractor would be fine and sufficient for our purposes. But I do want to make sure that you remember that it is it's recommended that you adhere to the most strict requirements, which are generally the local permitting requirements. So unfortunately, as a state agency, we can't, kind of go out to all of the local jurisdictions and make sure the local permitting requirements are met. So that's something we're going to give you on good faith. So I think a letter from the city, as you mentioned, would be plenty sufficient for us. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Susan. Lori and Adams kind of piggybacked off of that to ask, do encroachment permits from Caltrans, PG&E, et cetera, your answer applies to those as well.
Right. Yes, of
Yes.
course. Go
I-
ahead, Jeannie.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. We have in our application 2 different permit sections, I guess, one under site control, one under bid ready plans and specs. We do ask if there are any permits required for this activity, and if so, to describe what permits are required and include anticipated dates of obtaining the permits and any prerequisites needed to obtain the permits. If the permitting requirement is under site control, we do ask that you upload an opinion of council that all rights, easements, and permits have been obtained. I hope that clarifies some things.
Oh, that's better. Thank you, Jeannie, for that clarification.
Thank you both. Terry Solis asks, COC membership. We will apply for a competitive service application. Does the city have to be a member of the COC, or is it the navigation center that is a member of the COC? How do we show this? Susan.
Sure. That actually is in the FAQ document. We have this question. So the COC membership would need to either be held by the jurisdiction or the subrecipient that is going to be running the service. So if you look at the FAQ document, you should get some additional information on that. So in your circumstance, the navigation being a member of the COC should be fine, in which case we would need a letter on the COC letterhead indicating that they are a current member of the COC. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Susan. Amy Bergstrom asks, sorry for more questions. That's okay. That's why we're here. One of our applications is purchasing a fire truck. The supplier states that their price could increase a certain percentage each quarter. Can we build the potential increase in our application, and how would we include that on our sources and uses? Susan, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, we do recommend overestimation. So the general go-to is, roughly 10%. You can overestimate how much the costs are going to be, and I would build that into your application. And on the sources and uses, you can just add that as an estimated amount, because the sources and uses are going to be estimated. Obviously, over the course of a 3-year grant, prices can change, things can change. So we do anticipate that, and I would, as a rule of thumb, build overestimation is going to be the key there to avoid a possible amendment later. So thanks for that question.
Susan, thank you again for answering. Okay, that was the last one in the Q&A, and I don't have any more questions in the webinar chat. Just going to give a few more moments for any last-minute questions to come in.
And just to add to Susan's regarding unforeseen costs that may come up in your project, we always encourage on the sources and uses and in the budget, like Susan said, to put contingency costs as a line item on the sources and uses. So if that is the case, that the cost does increase, we can refer back to the sources and uses and know that you have accounted for that unexpected increase.
Thank you, Mamie.
Mhm.
Anonymous attendee asks, on-site control, property verification, legal documentation, is it acceptable to use parcel quest for property information, or is a copy of the actual deed required? Susan, go ahead.
Sure. We did get this question into the unit inbox with a couple of examples, and we did respond just early this morning, so you may not have gotten it yet. But, of course, it's going to be case by case. What we're looking for is to make sure that when we do a review, can identify the ownership of the property. And in the parcel quest documents that you sent to us in the unit email, we would accept that. That would suffice. So the actual deed is always better. We'd love to see those, but parcel quest would be acceptable under those circumstances. So thank you for that question.
And just to add to that, as long as that we can visibly see that it states the ownership of that particular property location. So that's what we're looking for.
Okay, that was also the last question that was in the box. I think we can wrap it up now. Thank you everyone for attending office hours today and for your questions. Please reach out to our inbox if you have additional questions. Hope everyone has a fantastic day.
Thank you, everyone, for all the questions.
Yes, thank you. Have a good day.